stands alone. For now, they are currently at the top of the Big Ten standings in men's basketball. Really looking forward to talking about all of that, and we will discuss the contract that wasn't in regards to Alex Bregman, who is now a member of the Boston Red Sox, ending one of the most arduous and just downright annoying sagas that we've seen in Detroit sports in a minute. But before we start the show, welcome into I'll Say This. I guess technically we have started the show. This is the prologue. This is the scene at the beginning of Dark Knight Rises where they take over the plane. I'm just wondering why someone would shoot a man before throwing it out of the plane. And then the movie starts. So let's get some stuff out of the way. If you like this show, you can find us on Apple Podcasts. You can find us on YouTube. You can find us on Spotify. You can follow me on Twitter at Castellani2014. If you're watching this on YouTube, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, hit that little bell. That way you are notified every time that we make a video. And if you want to find all our content, you can find it at castellanicontent.com. That we keep as far as castellanicontent.com, the title of Castellani content should be castellanicontent.com. We keep the geese flowing, because we're updating all the time. Michigan basketball videos, I'll say this, Chris and company, other miscellaneous things that we like to do, always getting updated, and you can find all that stuff. It's beautiful, it's sexy, it's in order, right on that front page, castellanicontent.com. So, appreciate everybody for your continued support. Let's jump into some college hoops and talk about the Michigan Wolverines, who had their best week in basketball in probably 4 years. Now, look, this team's already gotten off to, they'd already had a good year. I am willing to say that I think a lot of Michigan fans and even a lot of non-Michigan fans elevated how they felt about this team based on the week that they just had. Michigan goes 2-0 this week in a tough stretch. They play at home against a top 10 Purdue team. Purdue had a very rough week. They actually lost twice. They ended up losing at home against Wisconsin as well. Top 10 game, Michigan came from behind and won, and then they survived on the road in Columbus against your arch rival, Ohio State. And Michigan now stands alone atop the Big Ten. Let's talk about it. We'll start with the Purdue game, a game that we've seen glimpses of it, bits and pieces of it throughout the season, but this was really a moment, this particular game, I guess nationally streaming, it was on Peacock, but it just felt right. This was a rock fight, Big Ten slugfest between two really good teams, two really good coaches, and a fantastic environment. I am going to talk about the game, but I think sometimes Chrysler Center gets, I'm not going to say unfairly criticized. I think that people sometimes just are wrong in regards to the type of environment that Chrysler Center can be. Here's the thing with Chrysler Center, is that there's a very wide variance. Like when you look at the really elite home arenas in the Big Ten, like Breslin or Assembly Hall, I'd even probably throw the Rack in there, their baseline is loud. Like there's not a whole lot of bad Izzo teams, but even in the Izzo's down years, that place can get ridiculously loud. Indiana hasn't been great for a long time. That can still be a really tough place to play. Michigan, I think at its peak, can be a very brutal, loud, rowdy environment to play in. The problem is when they're bad, it's a morgue. Now, I thought last week against Purdue, that was as loud and as crazy as we've seen that place probably since the Beeline year. Shout out to the student section. Shout out to the people that came out. You know, the players fed off of that energy, but they still found themselves behind early. And it was such an inspiring effort. And I feel like I should be able to provide more hard-hitting analysis than what I'm about to say. But when I watch college basketball, it's a bit different, or basketball in general, it's a bit different than how I watch baseball or take in that game, where I feel like I'm much better with the numbers and kind of breaking things down, where what I noticed with that game against Purdue was just how hard they were playing all game. And the stamina and the energy they had to sustain it. They went 100% on every single possession. And even when they were down, I'm like, man, I didn't think that they were playing bad. You know, a lot of the big mistakes that we've seen this team make, especially involving turnovers, we didn't see them make a whole lot of. Now, that's not to say that they were, playing beeline ball necessarily and just not turning the ball over at all, but you only had 3 turnovers in the second half. And I think what is inspiring a lot of confidence and a lot of hope in this Michigan team right now are the adjustments that you see the players making, but in turn, the adjustments that you see the coaching staff making. I think the worst place that a coaching staff can be is complacent, where you just kind of start repeating the same things, doing the same things, going with the same rotations. And I felt like Michigan has gotten some really good minutes off the bench over the last few games. You have Roddy Gale, who really played his best game of the season. I don't know if statistically it was, but I would say in terms of impact, They had some foul trouble in the first half of that game. He comes off the bench, plays as well as he's played in quite a while. It was his second game, I believe, coming off of the bench. Not just he's not sixth man, but really seventh man, with Will Cheddar kind of being the first guy who gets any sort of tick coming off the bench for Michigan. I thought he played really, really well defensively. I thought they played hard. Braden Smith gets off to a really hot start. I don't want to just recap, go down the list and recap the entire game here. I'll just say it was as fired up as I'd been watching a Michigan basketball game in a long time. And I'm no genius for saying this, because I have friends in the media who pointed this out, and I paid relatively close attention to the offseason. I was pretty in on this team early on in the year, where I'm like, okay, I think like their ceiling or my expectations for them changed pretty early, where I just saw the team, I saw them play together, and I said, I think this is probably going to be a pretty good group. At the same time, with them just trading blows with Purdue back and forth the way that they were, and the crowd getting into it the way that it was, I don't know, it just made me very happy. Like, of course, I was fired up they won. I thought that it was great. Love seeing the crowd the way it was, but I just thought the effort and the intensity that they brought to that game for a team, and let's be honest, a lot of these guys, not all, because you do have guys like Vlad who played in the Final Four and stuff, but there's some guys in this team who haven't played in those big pressure Big Ten environments, and it seemed like they thrived off of that pressure. They thrived off of that energy. And I'm going to bring this up when I talk about the Ohio State game as well. But for all the criticism that we've given this team about their inability to hold on to leads, and I will discuss the fact that that could come back to bite them, there is also something to be said about a team that's capable of winning and finishing close games. And I think early on in the season, whether it was the Oklahoma game or the Arkansas game or the Wake Forest game, even Minnesota, the road game that they lost, their first Big Ten loss, they've had some trouble down the stretch finishing games. I feel like over the last month or so, they've really flipped the script. And the fact is, I think that the number one sign that you're watching a team that has the ability to make a deep run in March is when you're watching a team that's consistently getting better throughout the season. And we can't ignore the fact that 2.5 weeks before beating Purdue at home, they went to Mackey Arena and got their doors blown off. I mean, it was a flat-out massacre, a game that was over really after the first possession. Donaldson turned the ball over for an easy layup, and that was it. For you to come back home 2.5 weeks in control of your own destiny to win that game, I thought that was awesome. And it just made me really happy for the players. Like I find this team to be very likable. Now, they can drive you nuts, but I find the players and the coach in this group to be a likable group, just because you never question effort. You never question toughness. You never question the fact that they're learning, or that there's a lot of unselfish players on this team, it feels like. And so when they're rolling, and sometimes it's not always the case, but over the last few weeks, they have been very fun to watch. It's crazy to say it now, with how much time flies, but that Penn State game, that stretch that Trey Donaldson had when they were without Vlad Golden at the end of the Penn State game, really changed the entire season. For this team to now find themselves in the driver's seat in the Big Ten standings. Now, we got a long ways to go, and they got some big games coming up against including two against Michigan State. But I think that's a stretch that we're kind of looking back on and saying, like, that was really a moment for this basketball team. They've played really well lately. Then, of course, on Sunday, the Purdue game was so great, but you were concerned about letdown. It's not even letdown. Ohio State's not bad. They've got some players. They got some scores. I thought Michigan and Ohio State played a great game on Sunday. Just a well-played, good offensive game. Teams were hitting their shots. It was back and forth. I mean, how many ties or lead changes were there? There were like 16 lead changes in this game. I think that Michigan came in prepared. The number one thing that you have to avoid that Michigan was not able to do when they played in Mackey is you have to avoid letting the crowd completely consume you and take over the game. Ohio State came out firing. They shot 70% the first 10, 15 minutes of the game. And Michigan did a good job of weathering the storm by just playing the game offensively that they wanted to play. And it started with Vlad Golden. You could tell that there was really nobody down low that could match Michigan's height, and creates a matchup nightmare when you have these 2 7-footers that are playing with each other. But at the same time, you had Danny Wolf getting into foul trouble, and he was also very passive, I felt like, in the first half, which is he's a very fun player. And in the second half, he was out of his mind amazing, right? Like his stock is rising just because his highlight reel is going to be as impressive as anybody's. I mean, he's kind of that equivalent of that baseball player who's going to strike out a lot. But when you watch his best stuff, you're like, God, this guy can run, he can throw, he can hit for power. He can kind of do a little bit of everything. It's just kind of around the edges where he gets a little bit frustrating sometimes. But, they fed Vlad early in the game. Michigan started to hit some outside shots. Namari Burnett had a really nice game. The guy who's had, I think, a sensational year for this team is Will Cheddar. And I think there's a lot of intangibles that Will Cheddar brings to this ball club beyond just what you see on the court. I think obviously he's been a program guy, comes back over from the Juwan era, smart player, great leader. And Greg Waddell, when we had him on Chris and Company, made a really great observation that, again, this is why I interview people who are smarter than me. When he pointed out the fact that as good as Will Cheddar has been off the bench, it does create something of a depth problem because you can't really play Cheddar with Vlad and Danny Wolf. And I think that Dusty has been aware of that. I think it's one of the reasons why he's been going with Roddy Gale off the bench. I also think that Gale, just as an energy guy, probably it fits better coming off of the bench. And Reuben Jones has played very well. Reuben Jones, I know I'm all over the place. Reuben Jones against Purdue made 3 ginormous plays down the stretch. And this was a guy who'd really been struggling, again, growing in confidence. But back to the depth problem that I was kind of pointing to, I think that Dusty is aware of the fact that you can't really play those 3 guys together. So he's trying to get legit minutes off the bench from either Justin Pippen or LJ Kaysen. And Kaysen, look, I thought he played quite well over these last 2 games. He's not afraid to fire it, man. You talk about a confident player. That guy gets any sort of opening, he's going to fire it. But you saw in the social media video that came out after the Purdue game, Dusty pointed to LJ Kaysen and said, you gave us good minutes. I get the impression that whether it's the turnover issues when Donaldson isn't running the point or the depth problem and kind of just the court spacing issue you run into when you have potentially have Cheddar, Vlad, and Danny Wolf all on the floor together. I think that Dusty's honed in on the fact that you need probably that one more scorer, that one more athlete on the floor just for 10 minutes a game. I think they're trying to get that out of LJ Kaysen. Hard to do with a freshman, but in terms of confidence, he does not play like a freshman. He'll make freshman mistakes every so often, but they've pointed out the fact that he's been really good in practice, and I think he can add a lot more to this Michigan team down the stretch. They had a chance to bury Ohio State late. They didn't do a lot of stupid things. Okay, they missed a dunk, but I'll forgive them for that. There wasn't really the turnover problems or the boneheaded mistakes. I just thought they were getting some really good looks late that could have buried OSU, and they didn't. It ends up, being a tie game. Michigan gets 4 points back. Still some free throw issues with this ball club late in games. I'll talk about that here in a second. But some really good defense down the stretch. Michigan holds on. They win by 3 in Columbus. We've said it a million times on here, and especially when talking about an Ohio State team that I believe is, as of now, projected to be in the tournament. Don't apologize for wins, and you do not apologize for road wins. This was a masterful, great, fun week of Michigan basketball, and I'm praising them right now because I am going to circle back around and criticize them here just a little bit. And this is potentially just my own cynicism talking because March is cruel. March is very cruel. But I've watched this team closely, and we've all had a lot of fun watching this team very closely. That's undeniable. But this is definitely a team that's capable of winning the Big Ten. That is, right? They're in first place right now for a reason. At the same time, whether it's the turnover stretch, whether it's sometimes inability to put teams away, they've played all of these close games, and they've won a ton of these close games. And that is very exciting in season because there is a tomorrow, right? There is another Big Ten game that you have to worry about. And hey, they've won 2 close games this week. Just got to keep rolling, got to keep going. And hey, if you drop one of these, you can find a way to get it back. The comparison I make, we'll go back to baseball, is that team that wins 90-something games and has like a negative run differential. You give them credit for winning close, but the margin for error is very thin. The point I'm trying to make is, despite the fun I've had watching this team, despite the fact that I see them probably winning, at least winning a share of the Big Ten at this point, I still haven't reached a point where I feel like I can trust them in March. And maybe that's just how it has to be when talking about a first-year coach and a program that hasn't made the tournament in 3 years. But I do remember with some of the Beeline teams and even with the second-year Jawan team in the COVID year thinking like they're going to have to play like crap to get knocked out of the tournament in the first weekend. Problem is this team, they will both play like crap and play amazing on the same possession. Like that inconsistency scares me. Now, in fairness, I felt this way about the Beeline team in 2018. Where they had that great run in the Big Ten tournament, right? But they struggled with free throw shooting. They struggled really with outside shooting throughout the season. They were down double digits early in their first round game against Montana. They were down, took a miracle shot to beat Houston just to get to the second weekend, and then they ended up playing in the national championship. So I love how fun this is, and I love all the close games, but I would like to see at some point them really take one of these opponents, one of these quality opponents, and really bury them late. Just to know that it can be done, because by the time you get to March and everyone's playing for their season, weird shit happens. Those 2-point wins can become 2-point losses. And I feel like I'm speaking too negatively about a team that's wildly overachieved at this point, but it's just something I've been thinking about. They've had a lot of close games and a lot of balls bounce their way, and you earn good luck in this game. They deserve a lot of praise for that. But no, the coin flip could land on the other side. Is that a thing? Is that an analogy? I don't know. I'm kind of talking out of my ass. At the end of the day, Michigan basketball on February 17th is standing atop the Big Ten, and I'm incredibly proud of them and proud of the job that Dusty has done, not just with this group, but you really get the impression that this is something that can last. They're going to bring in some guys here, and they have culture guys. They have guys that are going to be coming back. Dusty will continue to be relentless on the recruiting trail. This program, regardless of where this thing finishes, I think is in an excellent place going forward. All right, let's talk about Michigan State, who is in not as excellent of a place necessarily, though they had one of their gutsiest wins of the season on Saturday night against Illinois. But we are going to start with the loss that they had at home, a shocking loss to Indiana at Breslin, a game that I was watching. And and Michigan had played, so it was I was fired up after the Michigan-Purdue game, and I was just thinking, okay, I'll kind of, I'll half-ass watch this. I'll be sitting on the couch. Michigan State will pull away. I'll pay attention to the box score. Watch consume enough where I feel like I can come on here and give you guys legitimate analysis. But I'm not going to be watching with my face and with my eyeballs glued to the screen. And guess what? Early on, Michigan State was winning 20-6. I'm thinking it's cruise control from here. Izzo, very fitting, going to beat Indiana to pass Bobby Knight at home for the most Big Ten wins by any coach in history. And then it's very simple. Indiana went to zone. And I wish someone smarter than I could explain this. And I think I can kind of navigate my way through it. But zone defense is just Tom Izzo's kryptonite, man. It has been for a long time. They've lost tournament games because of it, struggling against Syracuse. There was the 2018 game in the NCAA tournament where they clanked 1 million threes. And Indiana, who I think, as Izzo pointed out the next day, had played 4% zone defense all season, goes to 90% zone defense against MSU. And I think that it speaks to something that had been out there for a minute, but it was worst case scenario, which is the way that Michigan State beats you, or the way to make Michigan State beat you, is you have to get them to beat you from the outside. This is not a great 3-point shooting team. They've done a great job with their guards running the offense consistently all year. They've gotten good looks, but MSU started clanking a lot of outside shots. They were getting some good looks and just missing them. Indiana cuts into the lead. They take the lead. Made all their free throws down the stretch. You got to give Mike Woodson's crew a lot of credit for that in a loud environment like that. They did not miss a big free throw. It was consistently the opportunity, going from 1 to 2 possession games with the free throws that they were making. That was big. And MSU just fell short. They do this every year. And I'm sure it's annoying. And if I'm a State fan, I'm still mad by it because it, in terms of Big Ten championship implications, it's a huge loss. But every Izzo team has the what the fuck loss at home. Now, Indiana isn't awful. I've seen, there's been some losses that they've had in previous years where they lost to them. There was one year, it was one of the Final Four teams, I think it was 15, when Illinois was big time bad. I think it was Brad Underwood's first year, and they lost at home. There was all the boo-booey games, right? Take your pick. This one was very surprising, though, and really put a damper on their Big Ten championship plans. And then you go to Illinois on Saturday. I have a lot to say about this game, okay, because I have a lot to say about two programs here. Let me take a swig here of this sparkling ice, no free ads. I could cut this, but I don't want to. Michigan State goes on the road against Illinois. Illinois has become, or at least their fan base on social media has become the fan base that, like, they hate everybody and everybody seems to hate them. And Brad Underwood's done a marvelous job at Illinois. That's undeniable. I mean, he's won a Big Ten, won a Big Ten tournaments. They've been to the Elite Eight. He got that second weekend monkey off his back. That's all great. But they come out firing against Michigan State, and they can't miss. They're up by 16. It's a nationally televised game. You got Gus Johnson on the call. Michigan State can't do anything. I mean, they can't move the ball. They can't make a shot. You figured State would make a run, right? Like, that's what happens in these games. Basketball is a game of runs. Illinois wasn't going to be shooting lights out the entire game. And MSU, I thought in the last 30 minutes of that game, I don't want to use the season-saving moniker because at the end of the day, this team's making the tournament. And had they have lost to Illinois, we know how dangerous Izzo teams can be in March. At the same time, I think that the way that State won this game, it's definitely one you put a star by because of who the star was. And in this case, it was Jackson Kohler. Last year, and really over the last several seasons, Michigan State's bigs have been much maligned for their inconsistency and the fact that Izzo programs, which are kind of built on toughness and rebounding, haven't really rebounded particularly well. This year, they have figured out a way to kind of do this big by committee thing where there's not really one stud, but there's several guys that are capable of giving you good minutes. And I feel like over the last several weeks, opposing teams have kind of figured that out. And I think in the game against Indiana, it was very apparent where if you want to win with the zone, you got to get that middle touch. And I don't know if Izzo, at least in that game, felt confident with any of those bigs getting that middle touch, making those kind of, 10 to 15-foot jumpers near the free throw line. And then from the clouds, Jackson Kohler played a monster game against Illinois. Now, I've liked him. I liked him coming into the year. He bulked up a lot, and he's had these moments. But against Illinois, I mean, he took over that game and took the crowd out of it, and Illinois was just stunned. And I've been watching college basketball, watching sports a long time. I don't know if I've ever seen a team go the final 8.5 minutes of a game without scoring. Illinois was getting good looks, and you give State a lot of credit for weathering the storm and battling, and Kohler was incredible, and they hit some huge shots down the stretch. Illinois just could not hit anything. They were getting good looks from inside, they were getting good looks from outside, and goddamn, for a program that hasn't made a Final Four in 20 years, this is a Michigan-based show, but just shut the fuck up. That's a game you gotta win, dude. You're up 16. You're retiring Terrence Shannon's upside-down jersey. Did you guys see that? I got to talk about this. I know I'm all over the place today. Illinois was retiring Terrence Shannon's jersey. And when they lowered it from the rafters, it was upside down. I can't think of any better foreshadowing for how the second half of that game went than that moment. Huge moment. I mean, if State loses that game, their goals in regards to what happens in March are obviously very much ahead of them, but you almost could have kind of kissed their Big Ten championship hopes goodbye. That was a huge second half and a moment in which Tom Izzo officially surpassed Bobby Knight as the winningest Big Ten basketball coach of all time. It's so I've talked about Izzo on here many times before, and humble guy, incredible record, as a coach with the resume that he's put together, but I've said it a million times. It is going to be so freaking weird when Tom Izzo retires. And I don't know when that's going to be, man. The guy still has ridiculous energy. I don't know. I mean, I remember back when I was in high school, 2013, 2014, people being like, how much longer does he have? And that was 12 years ago. So I'm never going to say never with Izzo, but what an incredible culture he's built there. And I said a few weeks ago, I think it was when I had Stoney on, that we're never really going to see another coach like Izzo again, which of course led to people being like, well, he's only got one championship. And it's like, well, let me respond to you, you stupid fuck. The fact is, I mean, a coach being there for that long, to maintain that consistency, to go to that many Final Fours. We've already seen multiple coaches leave because this has been an evolving game for so long, a game that's forever changing. Tony Bennett was a relatively young guy, retired. Jay Wright still had a lot of good years left, retired. And Izzo has adapted every step of the way. And I don't know how this ends for them, at least in terms of this season, but people talk about Bobby Knight, they put him on the Mount Rushmore of greatest Big Ten or greatest college basketball coaches, period. To me, at this point, when you look at the overall resume, I feel like Izzo belongs right there, because I think it is harder to win in the Big Ten than it's ever been. I think it's harder to win in the tournament than it's ever been, and he's kind of just kept rolling. So congratulations to him. I guess I should probably address the elephant in the room, and that's the fact that these two teams play each other on Friday. It's in Ann Arbor. They will play again, the final regular season game of the year in East Lansing. MSU does have another game, I believe, on Tuesday against Purdue, a Purdue team that's lost 2 in a row. I want to say this is in Breslin, and then Michigan State will travel to Ann Arbor to play Michigan. It's huge. I mean, it's the biggest Michigan home game in a really long time. I guess maybe North Carolina in the last Beeline year, but you can't go with any of the COVID year games because there were no fans. It's bigger than anything from the last few years of the Juwan era. I mean, as in the first year of Juwan, they were going to be a tournament team before it got canceled. But I would say that probably since 2019, 2018, I'd even consider going as far back as like 2013, 2014, when the Big Ten was such a slugfest night in and night out, and Michigan was consistently at the top of the standings. I mean, it's been a long time since Michigan's found themselves in this position in a year that wasn't the COVID year. I hope they embrace it. Now, I hope they win, and if they lose, I'm going to be really upset and pissed. But they have an opportunity, as Dusty talked about in the locker room after the game against Ohio State, to do something that is potentially forever. And I know March is what matters. Championships are fun. Banners are fun. And you can't ignore it, okay? We talked about it with Greg. There is sometimes a flukiness to the tournament in regards to matchups, who you play or how you play. The Big Ten season is a grind, and Michigan right now has themselves in position. Now, just because they're in the driver's seat doesn't mean they can't crash the car, right? But they are in position to do something I don't think many people expected them to do. And even if they fall short of this, they have still gone well above expectations this season. At the same time, fucking beat MSU. All right, let's talk a little Tigers baseball, as the saga that began with a bang but ended with a fizzle, that is the Alex Bregman saga, has come to a close. Tigers officially getting things started in spring training right now, as we're officially into batting practice video season, where we see like grainy footage of Riley Green hitting a home run in batting practice, and we immediately think he's going to win the MVP, stuff like that. But we did finally get some closure. Alex Bregman signed a 3-year deal with opt-outs after each season, the first 2 seasons, with the Boston Red Sox. He will be earning $40 million this year, making him like the 3rd or 4th highest paid player this year, I think, in terms of just for 2025. It came out that the Tigers offered Alex Bregman 6 years, $171.5 million. He ultimately chose to take the higher annual value and go to Boston to play for the Red Sox. This opened things up to a lot of theories and frustrations. Look, I'll talk about Bregman in a second, kind of where I stand on where his mind is at. But I want to start by just talking about the Tigers as a whole, because this opened the door for a lot of people saying, are they going to grab Arenado? Are they going to do this? I am under the impression this is going to be their squad. And they're going to roll it back with Jace Young, and they're going to roll it back with Matt Vierling. And I don't know if my happiness regarding the end of the Alex Bregman saga is blinding me potentially. But now that we've gone through this whole cycle, I find myself feeling better about the offense than I expected to, and I feel like I shouldn't. And it's not to say that they've done anything incredible in the offseason. You had Glaber, who's going to hit lefties, that's fine, and maybe you had another guy here or there. I'd still like to see him add another righty bat, but I think that we still need to put into perspective how young last year's team was, and how much, despite the numbers maybe being what they were for some of these guys, how the sample size wasn't really large enough for us to properly judge some of these people. The sample size wasn't large enough to judge Jace Young. Jace Young was a first-round pick, top 100 prospect, top 50 prospect, I think, right? Like, we can't take whatever it was, 30-something games that he played last year, and act like that's going to carry over to this year. Same with Jahan, even Colt, who gave us an entire year. You got to think he's going to be better, right? Kerry, you got a fully healthy Kerry Carpenter. The season turned around when he got healthy last year. Like, I think even with the lack of moves, I would be stunned if this offense doesn't take steps forward with the young roster that they've put together. And so much of that is me putting my faith in the regime, because There was a time not that long ago where if we called up a player, I mean, let's be real, they weren't going to be good. I mean, the amount of dud middle infielders that Al Avila shat out that you knew didn't have it and never developed anything was staggering. I have faith now that they can find these guys and turn them into good players. There was a really interesting piece that Foolish Baseball did about Parker Meadows, how they fixed his swing last year. That's the kind of stuff that they weren't able to do in the past. And so, while I did find myself initially disappointed with not getting Alex Bregman, and for this season, I guess I would prefer that he be here. This is still the highest payroll in the division, which is sad. And I still think there's a legit chance they can be the best team in the division. This pitching staff's going to give people nightmares. And maybe this is finally like baseball around the corner, like eternal optimism, Castellani shining through. I'm not sure, but I still think organizationally they're in a good place and they're going to continue to be. As far as a Bregman is concerned, he didn't want to play here. Yeah, no, I mean, it's as simple as that. I actually came away from this with a lot inspired because what I didn't want was a repeat of the Correa situation because I still maintain, and I know they gave him an offer and all that shiznit. I get it. Carlos Correa wanted to be here. Carlos Correa would have came here. He wanted to play. I don't think him and AJ sat down for breakfast just to talk about the weather. Okay. I really think that it was something fans were looking forward to. It was something that was being predicted. Analysts, fans of other teams. It was a perfect fit. And I felt like they cheaped out. And they didn't just go with the worst option. They went with the worst option ever and went out and got Javi. And I was worried that we were going to look back at this and I was going to see the offer they gave Bregman. I was going to say, God damn it, we could have done that. Not the case. I'm frankly stunned Illich went 6 years, 170. That weirdly gives me a lot of hope because this guy said no, but somebody else will say yes. And that somebody might end up being a person that you have on your roster right now. It might be that Riley Green extension. Who knows, right? I mean, I would just throwing it out there. And I think that might have to be the way to go because in regards to Bregman and me saying he doesn't want to be here, when I say that, I think a lot of people kind of take issue with it and say, why? What's going on? Is there something wrong? There have been times in the past where I felt like organizationally this team didn't have it, whether it was because the front office was poor, ownership was poor, management was weak, the analytics department wasn't up to snuff, or that I just felt like the culture wasn't very good. That's not the case anymore. This entire organization has a new coat of paint. They made the playoffs last year and were the story of baseball for about a month and a half. Okay, people are looking forward to the Tigers again. The reason, guys, hitters have hesitancy about coming here is the park. It's as simple as that, guys. And I know that kind of sucks and people can complain about it. It is what it is. My whole argument has been Tigers have built around pitching historically anyway. There have been guys who've come here and hit here, but I'm not going to lie to you. This is known to be as a home run park. And that's why I think sometimes people get it wrong. It's a massive park. We've seen guys hit 20 triples here. Like, you can hit the ball, but from a pure power standpoint, especially someone like Alex Bregman who loves to pull the ball and benefited a lot from the Crawford boxes in left field at what was formerly Minute Maid Park. A lot of guys have hesitancy about coming here. I mean, you remember Nick Castellanos on his way out basically shit talk the park, Now they did change the dimensions, and while I do still see them adding pieces in free agency over time, it does say to me two things. One, I think the Colt Keith contract is going to end up being one of the best contracts in sports because you got a guy who probably at some point in his career would have been really willing to test the free agent waters that you've locked up long term. And two, I think it speaks to the importance of when you have a guy that can hit here, lock him up. Like I'm getting on the phone and trying to see what I can do with Kerry Carpenter and Riley Green right now because these guys can hit here. And we've seen it. Now, the elite ones are the elite ones. Like Miggy in his prime rolled out of bed and could hit here. But some guys just fall victim to the spaciousness of Comerica Park. And I think that there was a concern with Alex Bregman that he was going to do the same thing because, you're splitting hairs. No one's turning down $40 million, but that was a good offer the Tigers gave him. And I think that pretty consistently he was waiting for somebody to give him a better offer, and he finally got it in terms of annual value. But, I don't know if he was going to be getting 6 years from anybody else. So that saga has concluded. I don't mean to puff out my chest necessarily because, look, the team won 86 games last year. It's not like they were gangbusters, but AJ said, they have been trying for several years to reestablish a winning culture. They've done that here. The next step is winning the division. And if you are too afraid to hit at this park, cool, man. I don't know what to tell you. All right. Anything else? No Lions stuff because football's over, but what do you want me to talk about the Commanders game again? That'll do it for today's show. I know it was all over the place, but fun show. That was straight talk. I had one cut, one pause. Besides that, this was like straight sports talk, like 35 minutes. All right. That will do it for today's show. Thank you guys very much. Like I said, CastellaniContent.com. You can find all our content. Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, notifications, subscribe, do your thing. Find us there. Jeff Rieger from 97.1 will be our Chris and Company guest this week. Known Rieger for a long time. Happy to have him coming on to the show. Michigan guy. We're going to be talking Michigan basketball, football, Tiger stuff. I want to ask him about his he had a very interesting relationship with Brad Ausmus when he was here, so that was kind of funny. But yeah, looking forward to all of that as we continue to pump out content. The first watch series will continue with our review of A Clockwork Orange. That will be coming here very soon. So lots of content coming down the pike. Stay tuned for all that. Michigan, go beat Sparty. All right, I'll talk to you real soon. Peace and happiness.